Logan sat at his desk, staring out the window of his office. The view of Miami's skyline looked picturesque in the late afternoon light, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. At 40, his life was supposed to be just the way he imagined it. A successful career as a marketing manager at one of the largest companies in the city, a beautiful wife named Laura, and a home filled with comfort and security. He glanced at the clock on the wall and sighed. It was already past 6. He had planned to leave early today, but as usual, work had a way of keeping him longer than expected. He reached for his phone, checked the time, and noticed he had missed a few calls from Laura. He frowned, wondering if something had happened at the hospital. Laura had been a nurse at the local hospital for years, and lately she had been coming home later and later. Her schedule had always been demanding, but now, it seemed as though her work was taking over their personal time. Must be a tough day, Logan muttered to himself as he set the phone down and began to gather his things. He quickly sent Laura a message telling her he'd be home in a bit. On the drive home, Logan couldn't help but replay the small changes he had noticed in their relationship. Laura seemed more distant lately. She was always on her phone, but it wasn't just the texting. She'd had long, private conversations in the other room, her tone sharp, as if something was weighing heavily on her mind. He tried not to be suspicious, but his instincts had been telling him that something wasn't quite right. When he walked through the door of their home, the house was unusually quiet. He dropped his keys on the entry table and walked toward the living room. There he found Laura sitting on the couch, her eyes glued to her phone. As soon as she saw him, she quickly put the phone down, but Logan noticed the subtle shift in her expression, a look that said she was caught off guard. "Hey," Logan said, trying to sound casual as he set his briefcase down. "How was your day?" Laura smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was good," she replied. "Busy as usual." He nodded, but something about her voice felt off. There was a tension in the air that wasn't there before. Logan glanced at the clock again. It was almost 9. Laura hadn't mentioned anything about working late, and she was usually home by now. The silence between them grew as Logan tried to ignore the growing knot in his stomach. "I was just about to make some dinner," Logan said, attempting to break the silence. "Are you hungry?" "Not right now," Laura replied, shaking her head. "I'm fine." Logan could feel the unease creeping up his spine. As he moved toward the kitchen, he couldn't help but feel that something was amiss. Laura had always been so open with him, so why the sudden distance? Minutes later, as Logan prepared dinner, he heard the sound of Laura's voice in the other room. She was talking on the phone, but this time Logan didn't recognize the tone. It was tense, hurried, like she was trying to hide something. He paused for a moment, listening carefully. "Yeah, I know. I'm just trying to figure out how to tell him." Laura's voice was soft, but Logan caught every word. Who was she talking to? And what was this about telling someone something? Logan felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the questions were already swirling in his mind. He quickly finished dinner, and by the time he set the table, Laura had ended her call and walked into the kitchen. She offered a small, forced smile. "I'll be right back. I just need to take care of something real quick," she said before walking out of the room. Logan watched her leave, and for the first time in years, he felt uncertain about his own home. Later that night, as Logan sat alone in their living room, he tried to put the pieces together. Was Laura hiding something from him? It wasn't like her to be so secretive, to leave things unsaid. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Something was definitely off. When she returned a short while later, Logan pretended everything was fine. But deep down, he knew the truth was slowly starting to surface. And it was only a matter of time before he found out what was really going on. The next morning, Logan tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. He woke up early as he always did to make coffee and get a head start on his day. As he sipped the steaming mug, his eyes drifted to the counter where Laura's purse sat. His gaze lingered on it for a moment, almost as if something was pulling him toward it. He'd never been the type to snoop, but the events of the previous evening kept gnawing at him. He walked over to the purse almost without thinking and unzipped the main compartment. Inside he found a few personal items, some makeup, and a wallet. But what caught his attention was a small, crumpled piece of paper tucked underneath the wallet. It was a ticket, a plane ticket to New York, dated for the previous weekend. Logan froze. Laura had told him she was working all weekend, catching up on shifts at the hospital. Yet here in his hands was proof that she had been somewhere else entirely. His pulse quickened and a sense of dread washed over him. Logan set the ticket down on the counter and paced back and forth in the kitchen. He thought about confronting Laura right away, but he hesitated. The last thing he wanted was to jump to conclusions, but the facts were staring him in the face. When Laura finally woke up, Logan was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to read the newspaper. He could hear her moving around in their bedroom, but she didn't come downstairs right away. The silence between them felt heavy, like there was something hanging in the air that neither one of them could acknowledge. After a few minutes, Laura appeared in the doorway, still wearing her pajamas. She offered a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning," she said, her voice soft, almost too soft. "Morning," Logan replied, his gaze never leaving the paper, even though his mind was miles away. He glanced up at her for a moment before speaking again. "I found something in your purse this morning." Laura stiffened, her smile faltering. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tightening just slightly. "A plane ticket," Logan said, his voice calm though his heart was pounding. "To New York. From last weekend." Laura's face drained of color, and for a moment she said nothing. Her eyes darted to the ticket on the counter, and Logan watched as she took a step back, as if trying to put space between herself and the truth. I can explain," she stammered, but Logan held up his hand, stopping her. "I don't want you to explain, Laura," he said, his voice steady but tinged with disappointment. "I want to know the truth." The room was silent for a long moment, and Logan could hear the sound of his own breath in the quiet. He didn't want to pressure her, but at the same time he needed to know. Finally, Laura sighed, sinking into a chair across from him. "Okay, fine," she said, her voice cracking. "I've been seeing someone else. His name is James. We've been talking for a few months now." Logan's chest tightened, but he didn't say anything. He just stared at her, his mind racing. James. A name he didn't recognize, but now it seemed to fit with the pieces of the puzzle that were starting to come together. "Why didn't you tell me?" Logan asked quietly, his voice a mixture of hurt and confusion. "I didn't know how," Laura replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to hurt you. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of you either." Logan's eyes narrowed, not in anger but in disbelief. "You've been lying to me for months," he said softly. "I had no idea. We were supposed to be a team, Laura." "I'm so sorry, Logan," Laura said, her eyes welling with tears. "I never meant for it to happen this way." Logan closed his eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He had known something wasn't right, but hearing it out loud made it all the more real. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Laura had betrayed him, and there was no going back from that. "I don't know what to say," Logan finally muttered. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city as the weight of the situation began to settle in. "I don't know who you are anymore." Laura stood up too, stepping closer to him. "Logan, please. We can fix this. I'll end things with James. I need you to understand." Logan turned to face her, shaking his head. "No. I don't think we can fix this, Laura. Not anymore." The silence between them grew heavy once more, and Logan realized that no matter how much he wanted to pretend things could go back to normal, they never would. The foundation of their marriage had cracked, and now, all that was left was the painful reality. Logan couldn't remember the last time he had felt so lost. The pain was suffocating, yet there was a strange sense of clarity in his mind. As much as he didn't want to admit it, he knew this was the end. The life they had built together, the laughter, the shared dreams, the promises, was nothing more than an illusion now. Laura was standing there, tears streaming down her face, but Logan couldn't bring himself to comfort her. How could he? How could he look at her the same way after everything that had happened? "I don't think I can do this anymore," Logan said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. He walked past Laura and headed for the door. He wasn't sure where he was going, but he needed space. He needed air. Laura's voice called out behind him, "Logan, please don't walk away from me like this. We can fix it, I swear." But Logan didn't turn around. He just kept walking out the door, down the steps, and into the crisp morning air. His mind was racing. He had so many questions, but the one thing that kept echoing in his head was why. Why hadn't she been honest with him? Why had she kept this from him for so long? Logan didn't know how long he had walked, but eventually he found himself sitting at a bench overlooking a small park near their neighborhood. The sun was beginning to rise, casting soft light on the trees and the quiet streets. For a brief moment, he closed his eyes and let the stillness wash over him. This was his life now. He didn't know what to do next, but he knew he couldn't stay in the same place. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. After a few hours, Logan finally gathered the strength to return home. He had to face Laura again, and he knew it wouldn't be easy. But he wasn't ready to make any more decisions until he fully understood where he stood. When he walked through the front door, Laura was sitting in the living room waiting for him. Her face was pale and she looked exhausted as if she hadn't slept at all. "I've been thinking," Logan said, his voice calm. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I'm not angry, Laura. I'm just disappointed. You've betrayed me in ways I never imagined." Laura's eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't speak. Instead, she simply nodded, her face a mixture of guilt and regret. Logan took a deep breath. "I need space. I think we both do." Laura stood up, her hands shaking. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" Logan paused. The word hung in the air between them, and for a moment he wasn't sure how to answer. He wasn't ready to make any final decisions, but he knew something had changed inside him. He couldn't pretend anymore. "I don't know yet," he said quietly. "But I can't keep living like this. We both need time to think about what we want. To figure out who we really are now." "I understand," Laura whispered. Her voice cracked, but Logan didn't look back. He couldn't. The distance between them was too wide now, and no matter how much they both wanted to make it work, the trust had been broken beyond repair. The days that followed were a blur. Logan kept busy with work, but his mind was never far from Laura. He couldn't stop thinking about the years they had spent together, and yet the realization was sinking in. Their marriage had been built on a lie. He no longer recognized the woman he had married, and the pain of it all weighed heavily on him. One afternoon he sat down and composed an email to his lawyer. It was time to start the process. Logan didn't want to drag things out any longer. He had been living in limbo for too long, waiting for answers that might never come. He needed closure, and that could only happen if they went their separate ways. As soon as he clicked send, Logan felt a strange sense of relief. He wasn't ready to end things completely, but he knew it was the only way forward. He couldn't change what had happened, and no amount of talking would undo the hurt. The next few days were tense. Logan and Laura avoided talking much, their interactions limited to necessary conversations about their home and the practical aspects of their lives. It was a silent acknowledgement that things had changed, that they were no longer the people they once were. Then one day the divorce papers arrived. Logan read through the document, his heart heavy. It was official. The end of their marriage was no longer just a possibility, it was a reality. As much as he had wanted to avoid this, he knew deep down it was for the best. The papers were clear, but there was one clause that caught his eye. It was a statement about shared expenses and the division of their assets. Logan blinked as he read the figure. $100,000. That was how much Laura owed for the years they had spent together, the vacations, the gifts, the shared expenses. It seemed almost absurd, but he didn't feel anger. He felt numb. Logan sent the signed documents back to his lawyer, finalizing the divorce. It was over. And although the pain of it lingered, he knew that the hardest part was behind him. It had been several weeks since the divorce was finalized, and Logan was starting to feel the weight of his new reality. The apartment felt different now. It was quieter, less cluttered, and although he missed the familiarity of it all, there was a certain peace that came with being alone. He didn't have to worry about secrets, about pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. The days were still long, and at times the loneliness crept in, but Logan was determined not to dwell on the past. There was no turning back, no undoing what had been done. He couldn't change the choices Laura had made, but he could choose how to move forward with his own life. He threw himself into work, focusing on his career like never before. The marketing projects that had been piling up suddenly seemed like a fresh start. Logan realized that, for the first time in years, he was truly in control of his time and his future. He didn't have to answer to anyone but himself, and that felt liberating. One evening, after finishing a particularly long day at the office, Logan found himself walking into his favorite cafe. It was a small, cozy spot near the edge of the city, a place he'd been frequenting for years. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as he stepped inside, and the familiar hum of conversation surrounded him. He ordered his usual, black coffee, no sugar, and sat down at a small table by the window. It was quiet enough to focus, but busy enough to remind him that life continued moving forward. As he took a sip of his drink, Logan pulled out his phone and glanced through the notifications. Among the usual work emails and messages, there was one that caught his eye. It was from Laura. The message was simple. "I'm sorry, Logan. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I hope you find happiness even if it's not with me." Logan stared at the message for a long time, his fingers hovering over the screen. He hadn't heard from Laura since the divorce, and part of him wondered how she was doing. Was she with James now? Had she found what she was looking for? After a moment of hesitation, Logan typed a response. "Thank you for your honesty. I wish you the best too. I'm moving forward." He pressed send, setting the phone down on the table. A strange sense of closure washed over him. It wasn't the message he had imagined sending to her, but it was the one he needed to send. He didn't need to relive the past. He needed to let it go and embrace the life he had ahead of him. As he sat back in his chair, he realized just how much he had changed in such a short time. The man who had once been so consumed by his relationship with Laura, by the hope of fixing things that couldn't be fixed, was now focused on himself. He was taking his time, rediscovering what truly mattered to him. He had forgotten what it was like to feel free, to make decisions without feeling like he had to explain them to anyone else. The door to the cafe opened, and Logan looked up to see a woman walk in. She was smiling, laughing with the barista as she ordered a coffee. She had an air of confidence about her, and for a moment, Logan couldn't help but notice the way she carried herself. It wasn't like the rush of infatuation he had felt with Laura, but rather a quiet appreciation for someone who seemed at peace with themselves. Without thinking, he smiled to himself. Life had a way of moving on whether you were ready or not. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to be ready for something new. Not a new relationship, not yet. But a new chapter. One where he wasn't defined by his past, but where he could build a future on his own terms. Logan picked up his coffee, took another sip, and looked out the window, watching the world pass by. He had no idea what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long while, he wasn't afraid of it. He was finally free.